from HP Enterprise. He's the Director of NonStop Sales for North America.
Good morning, everybody. Hope everybody's doing well today. I'd like to thank everybody for attending, particularly our customers. Events like this, like CTUG, these sort of forums are really important. Customers are able to share experiences, partners get feedback. NonStop, the NonStop division, we get collective opinion. Most importantly, gives us all an opportunity to build relationships. So again, thank you all for being here. On in the legal stuff, you all can read that. I'm not going to read it. Basically says anything I say is subject to change, and you can't commit me to anything. More legal stuff. Thank you, HPE. Okay, so this is what I'm going to be discussing today. At a high level, I'm going to be discussing a little bit about our business outlook, roadmap. I'm going to be discussing a new server we have called the NS2, and I'm going to touch briefly on mission-critical distributed ledger technology. So we take a look. NonStop is doing well. I can tell you that last year we exceeded both our revenue and our margin expectations. We've done this for the past 2 years. Operationally, we're flat, which is where we want to be in this sort of market and climate. Last year at this time, we had tremendous growth. We had double-digit growth. NonStop was able to contribute $120 million in our Q4 of last year to the corporation. This is a testament, our FY17 results is a testament that we have the right, might go out? No, there we go. Okay. That we have the right vision, we have the right support and sales teams, the right partners, and it's all because of you, our customers. So thank you. FY18, we got off to a slow start. This was partially due to organizational changes, not to mention that the corporation decided to split the company and sell off assets. So it created a lot of challenges for all of us. But in FY18, I can tell you that, again, we're going to exceed both our margin and our revenue contributions. The second half has been really strong for us. Again, thank you to our customers. I took over this position in May of this year. So let me just touch on that and give you a little background on me. So again, I'm Ken Goldman. I am the Director of North America Sales. I'm based out of Atlanta, Georgia. And I've been with Tandem / NonStop for a mere 37 years. So we're at a point now where I think we have organizational stability and we're going to exceed all our revenue objectives and margin objectives for the year. The NonStop X has gained a lot of traction. It's accounting for over 50% of our sales in our Q4, the current quarter. We're also in the process of transitioning to virtual NonStop. In the past 2 years, we've had 13 new logos. This year, we'll expect, or I should say FY19, we expect a couple more new logos. Those new logos basically have been 25% in finance, 25% in telcos, 50% in the other industries. HPE as a corporation is investing in the NonStop portfolio. So they're investing in the engineering team. We continue to hire engineers both in the U.S. and India. And right now they're focusing on talent in the area of virtualization as well as database services. The other thing I wanted to point out is that HPIT itself is making a big investment in NonStop in terms of their operation. And they're ramping up on NonStop, they're ramping up on NonStop SQL, and they're using this as a platform and a tool to replace current environment that runs on Oracle. Roadmap stuff, I'm not going to get into too much. You can take a look at it. All I want to say here is that the NonStop X is gaining tremendous momentum. And I want to say that the future of NonStop is NonStop X plus virtual NonStop. So that's going to allow HPE to leverage the Intel relationship. It's going to give us the ability to get on the Intel curve, which means that we can bring technology improvements even faster. It allows NonStop development to work more in conjunction with HPE development. And it allows us to utilize open source and more quickly be able to do a deep port. So we are committed to virtual NonStop for that product line. And you'll see improvements, continued improvements in that area every year. In addition to that, we're going to continue making enhancements and investments in NonStop SQL. The last thing that I want to say is that the NonStop Integrity or NonStop I platform has been a tremendous platform for us. It's been a real workhorse. As the exception and adoption of NonStop X takes hold more and more, we're going to reach a point where you're going to see that supersede NonStop I, and at some point in the future, NonStop I sales will be discontinued. So if we take a look at the new product we have, the NonStop 2, it's a virtualized, converged NonStop. So it's really a hybrid of our traditional converged systems, such as Blade and X, and we're adding to that virtual NonStop. So these are prepackaged configurations that are very attractively priced. And so this is a great product for test and development. It's a great product when you want to look for an alternative to Linux, you want to do something at the edge, or you need something for branch offices. So they're available. You want to buy them by the dozen, we're ready to help you. Just let us know. So a key initiative for us this year and next year is going to be mission-critical distributed ledger technology. I'm not going to get into this too much. You're going to hear a presentation on this later today. But I just want to say that distributed ledger is not blockchain. It is different. And if you need to know the difference, there's lots of techies in the room. Go grab one of them and they'll explain to you the difference because I can't. Our partnership with R3 has been great. And it basically allows us to disrupt, if you will, the environment. So there are a number of business processes where we can play. For example, contracts, settlements, supply chain, other such areas. So the combination of R3 with NonStop gives you mission-critical DLT. So that's basically all I have to talk about today. I am going to be available all day. I'd love the opportunity to meet you all. Some of you I've already met, some of you I know. Feel free to come up, introduce yourselves, and again, thank you for being here today.
Okay, thank you, Ken. As Ken said, it's great to get the community together for these events, and 37 years in NonStop, that was pretty impressive. But I was just thinking, how many people in the room, by a show of hands, can beat 37 years in NonStop? There's 1, 2.
I'm coming up on
2. Pretty good, pretty good.
37.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so I'm going to bring up our next speaker. Is going to provide the NonStop update for us, Justin Simmons, who's HPE enterprise architect and master technologist. He'll give us the update NonStop systems, and after Justin's talk, we'll have a break, and it's just going to be in the atrium behind. Okay, so Justin's all set. You ready to go?
I'm ready.
All right, take it away.
Mic'd and everything. All right, so I'm the Keith Moore substitute this year. So Keith says to say howdy. Keith says to say howdy to everybody. He had a wedding this week, so he normally loves coming up here. So I was fortunate that he had the wedding in the family to be able to be here to present to you. So I'm going to give the 2018 update. As Ken was saying, HPE is very excited about NonStop and is backing NonStop. There's a good reason for that. When we were HP at $128 billion, they really liked NonStop. HPE at $30 billion loves NonStop because we're still contributing as much as we ever did. As he said, the forward-looking statements. I like to look this around. Karen Copeland hates this, but you know, as they said, don't make any buying decisions based on what we say. And you know, my question back to Karen was, well, what would they base a buying decision on then? But there's no answer to that. And also, there may be some confidential stuff that I bring up. You're all considered part of the family. Don't go to IBM or Dell or Cisco and tell them all the great things we're doing. We don't want to scare them. So this is a view of the product line, the way that we're laying it out now. So we do have, as Ken mentioned, NonStop X, and that's really, is that showing up, the laser pointer there? It's invisible on my side. Okay. So NonStop X is the future, and the L series is for the NonStop X and the virtual NonStop. So they share a common OS between the two. As Ken mentioned, we have the I systems. They've been around for quite a while. Still a lot of workhorse systems in that, plan to be supported for quite a long time. Even when and if they go end of sale, you've got a 5-year runway with that. They pre-buy parts and everything else. But for the most part, if you track these things, the Itanium chip, which was originally designed to replace the Xeon x86, had some issues, and the x86 was able to overcome and actually surpass the Itanium EPIC architecture. So that's really the go-forward chip for what happened. So that's the go-forward chip for Intel. And as you know, NonStop migrated to that a while back. So it was very good. Gartner appreciated that. Gartner's been sort of bad-mouthing the Itanium for a while. Not necessarily that it's a bad chip, but that there's not a long future to it. So we needed to get on X. We did that. Like I say, the NonStop I is still very strong, but I don't know if Intel's going to come out with another Itanium release. So this might be the last spin for that. So virtual, why are we getting so excited about virtual NonStop? There's a couple of reasons. It allows us to play in the cloud environment, but as you can see here, you can sort of stop server sprawl instead of buying an individual server for all the requirements. Now people are going to more this hyper-converged virtualized model where you can spin stuff up. Also allows you to address the sort of Black Friday issues where you may be able to spin up extra things and send them down when you don't need them, so you don't necessarily have to build the church for Easter, as they say. So you can spin up and spin down. A lot of standards are going in this direction. A lot of manageability that I can manage my environment as I'm setting these virtual Linux, Windows, and NonStop systems up potentially. And really that allows the foundation for the cloud environment. So it allows NonStop to sort of start into that direction. We're not going to be launching NonStops in AWS anytime soon, but eventually that's certainly a possibility. So the initial release was on OpenStack. There was some very technical reasons for that. We could get OpenStack for free, and so that was what the dev guys used to get virtual NonStop up. They committed in 2017 to get it up on VMware, and we did in fact release a VMware version of virtual NonStop this past year. So we're getting some pilots on that. There wasn't a huge uptake in OpenStack. That wasn't quite as prevalent as we had imagined, but VMware is very popular. So we're now having 2 or 3 pilots coming up. We have a vNonStop we brought up in the Atlanta data center, HP's Atlanta data center, and you can connect to that. I think you'll have to talk to Dave Jones, who's back here raising his hand, and or Mark Flanagan, I think, maybe granting access to that. But it's a simple VPN connection. You can come in, take a look at the NonStop, play around with it. If you want to test some code on it, that's available. You'll be surprised to find it looks just like a NonStop. You won't really be able to tell it's virtual. So the plan is at some point to also support Hyper-V, but it puts us into this direction of NonStop as a service, where we may be able to offer a service. Well, that's really what we're doing in Atlanta, is really NonStop as a service. You can come into that and play around with virtual NonStop. So some exciting things there, but you can see there's a lot of effort being put into that. The NS2, I'm going to be here for tomorrow, Education Day. If anybody wants to go into more details about the NS2, I'm happy to talk about that in a lot more depth. But the idea is we had blade systems here. We look at this. We had console, we had storage clems, a couple of IP clems, a couple of NonStop processors. And when we released virtual NonStop, certainly on the OpenStack, like I said, there wasn't a huge uptake in that because it was fairly complicated. I mean, you really needed to know OpenStack, so you needed to get a hold of that group. Our OpenStack implementation was slightly different than just the off-the-shelf version because we need to make sure that our virtual NonStop processors are running in two physical processors, just to make sure it's NonStop. You know, if we put everything in one Linux system, that's not really bulletproof. So there's some configuration that needs to be done. So it was not as easy as we would have liked out of the box. So there was a lot of discussion amongst us internally. Can't we just release sort of a pre-configured V NonStop? And so the NS2 is what that is. It's really a pre-configured V NonStop. You can get it's a couple processors. These can be pizza boxes plus the console. And what they've done is they've just collapsed the thing down. It's already pre-virtualized. The clems are virtualized. You get IP clems. You get disk clems. You get I'm going to forget off the top of my head. I think it's you get a telco clem. I think is it 14 drives? Yeah. Yes. Yeah. It's 7 U's. It's very small, and it's a very fixed configuration. Like Dave said, there's two configurations, and that means there are two configurations. There's really not a lot of. You can't say, well, I don't want that many drives, or I want another storage clem instead of an IP clem. There's none of that. It's fixed. It is an appliance NonStop. Yes, virtual NonStop. So you don't have to worry about cloud. You don't have to worry about loading Linux. You don't have to worry about a hypervisor. You don't have to worry about any of that. You just buy the box and set it out there. So that was done. There's the artist rendering. No, it's actually a picture. You can get a NonStop in that box. It comes out. It is well, it's a little noisy for an office environment, but it does not require you could put it on the edge. You could stick it in an office, probably in a closet. Good box for test and development. Good box if you want to get to the L series, play around with it. Good box if you want to do some development. As Ken mentioned, good alternative to a Linux server. Nice edge play. So we're seeing a lot of possibilities for this. Right now it's a 2 and 4 processor. Fixed, we'll see, probably depending on sales, if they offer additional models right now. But it's still as fault tolerant as always. So we can see that we're developing a number of ways to consume NonStop. So the NonStop I is still out there, still strong, still supported for indeterminate amount of time. NonStop X is certainly where we're focusing most of the development and resources, along with V NonStop, which falls under X. So that's certainly the direction of the future. So 1808 will be out. I would suggest that you just read the compendium when you get that. Get all the bullets in here which you can see that we're doing a focus on virtual nonstop. We're now supporting VMware. As we say, there's a GUI that's being developed to help the launch and running and manageability of vNonstop. That will be quite good. The VMware version of this allows you to configure the CLEMs in a very standard nonstop method where you can get 4 different paths to the drive. The version of OpenStack that we used, there was some issues with the mirroring just based on the version of OpenStack. You could mirror the drives, but it wasn't as clean and it didn't look like the nonstop type mirroring that we're used to. VMware supports this, so that's a good thing. We've increased the unpartitioned VLANs, and we're offering now with vNonstop this idea of dynamic capacity, which has been requested for quite a while. So an ability for you to bump up capacity at a moment's notice. You buy this in sort of 30-day increments. You can get 30 days, 60, 90, 120. I think 120 is the cap out, if I remember correctly. But it's somewhat limited. This is, we're sort of dipping our toe in the water in terms of dynamic capacity. It's only available enough, and it allows you to bump 2 cores worth. So if you've got a vNonstop and your processors are 2 cores, you're licensed for 2 cores, you can buy the dynamic capacity and bump that for up to 30 days to 4 cores. And you can do it for 2 days and then go back to 2 cores, do it for another 2 days, go back to 2 cores. So you're allowed to use the 30 days in any way that you want. Anytime you bump it, it counts for a full day. So don't do it for 15 minutes and come back. So plan it a little bit. And Karen Copeland wanted me to say that, this is very specifically something that you want to plan. This is something that you call in the last minute and say, hey, boy, I really need this. Can you give it to me in the next 10 minutes? You really need to buy this up front. So, but it does allow you to go this. You can currently only, the dynamic capacity, you can only bump it 2 cores. So if I have a 2-core system and I decide, oh my gosh, I want to go to 6 cores, we're currently not allowing a 4-core jump. It's only 2 cores. So if you go to 2, you can go to 4. If you got 4, you can go to 6. But you can't make can't go to 2 to 6. I'm not sure why, but I'm sure there's a marketing reason for that. Well, like I said, we're sort of dipping our toe in this dynamic capacity model, so I think they want to get the bugs out of it before they go completely nuts with it. The NS2, this virtualized converged nonstop, this appliance nonstop, the nonstop in a box virtualized, when it was first released, there was no way to hook a virtual tape up to it. So people saw that as an issue, as it was. So they're now supporting that in 1808. Not a big deal there. And we're allowing some new commands there in OSS. So this SUID and SDID are sort of like prog IDing programs on the Guardian side. You can issue a command that will override that. So in this case, on the OSS side, if you've got something licensed with this, it will launch as the owner of the script or the owner of the file, not as the runner of it. So you can override that for security reasons if you want. And then we're offering a P-read and a P-write, which allows you to avoid the iSeek stuff up front before you do the read and the write. So it allows you to index into the file directly from the read and write command. So some good stuff. We're bumping the CLEMs to G10. G10 is a big release if you're an HPE customer. Besides being a nonstop customer, Gen 10 was a huge release. There's a lot of security stuff built into the Gen 10 processors and into the Gen 10 chips. So that's good. And the cold load CI, encryption improvements, EP2 processes, you can now flip that to a different processor if you want while the system continues to run. So that's good in case you need to change the backup or the primary process to a different processor. some safeguard enhancements. Probably let Zypro talk about those things, and Comforte, and a few things with C++ there. We're going to have a huge day tomorrow. Paul Denzinger's coming in. He's getting here at noon, and he and I are going to spend tomorrow, and Paul will spend most of tomorrow talking about SQLMX, different things that we're doing with Hibernate, KDBC, ODBC, things like that. So there's a number of enhancements. One of the things I will point out is this PLMX. We've added some enhancements to that. If you're not familiar with that, NonStop has been committing more and more to converting Oracle databases onto NonStop databases. So the PLMX is like PL SQL for Oracle. So we're allowing more and more commands directly where you'll be able to convert these databases with little to no impact on the applications that are running against those databases. So we've had 3 or 4 customers migrate already. I'm sure Paul will talk more about what we're doing with HPEIT is now converting some of their Oracle databases. We're in the process of that and offering our database as a service internally. So there's some big things happening within SQLMX. On the iSystem, we're still enhancing that. So again, I would suggest that you get the compendium. There's some new OSS directories, a couple dozen of those. Increased limits, tackle enhancements, measure stuff now where you can create a user-created snapshot to get measure data on specific stuff that you're looking at. Snapshot's 32-bit. That snapshot is 64-bit. We're moving beyond the SSL stuff. Now the TLS 1.2 will become the default security. So that's a good enhancement. And we're doing some amazing stuff within Pathway in terms of weighted. If you've gone to the ACS model and the multiple pathways running together, we can do a lot with the weighting now as to where server classes get fired up. So a lot of interesting work there. So as we transform NonStop, where are we going? Obviously, the focus, as we've said, is NonStop X virtual NonStop. Disruptive technologies. Ken already mentioned blockchain. We've got a couple blockchain talks here. And as Ken pointed out, technically it's a distributed ledger, not a blockchain we're running on there. We're running the R3 system on NonStop, and it is a distributed ledger. There's some subtle differences there. I'm happy to go into them. Not now. But there's a lot of stuff there. It's really sort of the takeaway is all blockchains are distributed ledgers. Not all distributed ledgers are blockchains. It's a sort of a superset of what a blockchain is. But we're getting a lot of interest in the R3 Quarter product and in doing some pilots with them. It's very interesting technology. It looks like all the verticals. If you're following the trade magazine, it's very, very big. Lots of hype around blockchain, distributed ledger in general. It's going to solve everything. If you read the quotes, it started out with I think Andreessen saying it's the greatest invention since the internet, and then people started trying to outdo him. It was the greatest thing since bread, greatest thing since electricity, greatest thing since the wheel. It was it started mushrooming. I'm not sure it's that great, but it's pretty good. Very interesting. And we're doing a lot of work, interestingly enough, on the Internet of Things, one of my favorite topics. HPE is doing a lot of work in this. If you read the press, they're talking a lot about edge and edge capabilities. So as we get more and more data, as more IoT devices are out there generating information, do we really have time to move all that information back to the core to be processed before making decisions on it? So the idea is to move the decision-making out to the edge. So this is just the old centralized, decentralized thing once again, invoking itself. So, but NonStop actually has a play on the edge, at the near edge, and even back So it's quite good, quite exciting what we're doing there. The consumption models we already spoke about, traditional on-premise, dynamic capacity, and moving eventually to this NonStop as a service model. And as I said, this sort of edge processing is very interesting to HPE, and we're looking at NonStop being able to play in that environment. As I said, there's a lot of focus on the SQL strategy. So we're looking at database as a service model. That's what the HPE IT is looking at, where we can just launch the database separate from NonStop itself. So we're just selling the database services in more of a cloud environment. The database compatibility is that PLMX, where we're making it very compatible with Oracle and other databases, where you may want to migrate on to SQL databases, SQLMX databases. They've always been very, very scalable in a scale-out fashion, which seems to be the way the industry is moving now. So we've already got those capabilities. You sort of get the availability as a byproduct. And analytics, we're doing some new stuff with analytics. We've always been very involved with that, always trying to move in analytic area. We're releasing a new product along those lines, which makes it a little bit easier to manage. So we can see this MXDM, SQL Express, which we're now selling, which is a GUI interface, allows you to manage with a nice standard GUI interface the NonStop SQL databases. So that was sort of our answer as people migrated off Oracle onto NonStop X. They were used to a product, generally they're running Toad from Quest, very nice GUI interface. So SQL Merlon or SQL Express is our answer to that. So we had a nice GUI interface. And this future product, we'll talk more about that tomorrow probably, NSDA, is NonStop Data Analytics. It's a workload management, historical trends. You can do dynamic metrics and drill down about what's happening with the database, what queries are running, how things are being managed. So a lot of very interesting stuff about that. This is what they're looking at releasing with that. So just to highlight a few things, instant dashboard for drill downs. There's a number of screens which show you how the database is running, what's doing, what's active, what files are being hit. So very nice graphics. You can drill down. You can also rubber band in. If you say, I want to look at this 5 minutes here, it focuses all the screens onto those 5 minutes so you can take a look at what's happening. Sort of workload compile time metrics and explain plan, very easily laid out there with this tool. There's a number of defined reports that'll be released with it, and the idea is to support sort of big data services, things like that. So it will be coming out. I don't know that I have the release date on that. So the idea is consider NonStop SQL. If you're considering a database, a relational database, a structured database for any of your analytics, we think NonStop SQL is a nice, good, generic platform now to be able to do that. And that we're wanting to go beyond just the NonStop portion of that. So emerging trends that we're seeing on the radar here. We've already mentioned blockchain a couple times here. We've got a talk on that. Jeff Skinner's in the room here somewhere. I think he's going to be speaking on that. And we do have pilots coming out. We've got some excellent things. I was talking to Randall too. I think they've got some stuff they're playing around with on blockchain. So it's very good. So blockchain is this idea of being able to start sharing information. If you've read the news, we're talking about the sharing economy. The whole thing about blockchain or Bitcoin when it first came out was the idea of, rather than having our own private ledgers that each one of us controls or a bank controls this anything, we're just going to put our ledger out there for everybody to see, and that actually makes it more secure because everybody agrees that I have so many Bitcoins, you have so many Bitcoins, we can exchange Bitcoins and anything because everybody can see the full disclosure. Now, the idea is when you're really doing business, you may not want complete openness with everybody in the world, right? You may want to have some privacy, some permissions associated with that. So that's where these distributed ledgers are coming in as we move from what was really, we'll call phase one of blockchain, where you've got Bitcoin, complete public, complete unpermissioned, anybody can join, anybody can come in, everybody can see everything, to this phase two of more enterprise systems coming up. What can banks do with this technology that will reduce fees, reduce complexity? What can the healthcare industry do with it? What can supply chain do with it? Things like that. Everybody's seeing some very interesting capabilities, but it will be probably more private and more permission. There'll be specific security associated with it, this, that, and the other thing. And then phase three, if Jeff's going to talk about that, is going to be IoT, where we may not even have actual people involved in this thing. This may be machine-to-machine type agreements that are taking place. So my car may negotiate with the power company to sell back a charge that it got. Price is right. Who knows? Some interesting dynamics there. And then there is also a Gartner and Forrester, and a lot of these are talking about this bimodal IT right now, where you've got groups within IT that are responsible for maintaining existing systems, and everything is fairly structured, laid out. Stuff is, requirements are given, they're developed, this, that, and the other thing, sort of a waterfall method. But there's another push for agile systems, agile development, scrum, sprints, things like that, where you're doing very fast time to market. And they're seeing both these. So the innovative side is doing this fast, agile type development. The older style is doing the very standard, keeping the lights on, making sure all the core applications are up. The idea is that really NonStop can support both these models. Traditionally, we've been on the structured side there, but there's a new wave of something called the reactive manifesto, which I'll talk about more tomorrow. But it's being very reactive to users, being very reactive to the load, being very reactive to failures, and being message-driven. Now, the Reactive Manifesto came out a couple years ago. When I first read it and Keith first read it, it almost sounded like a NonStop system. I mean, the way that they were developing these things. Very responsive to users means that you get a consistent response time all the time when you get things going. Elastic, meaning you can scale up and scale down depending on the load that happens. Obviously, being resilient to failures fits into our model particularly well. This is sort of a reaction to the multi-threaded environment that people have been programming in, where to get a lot of performance, I will generate extra threads. So if I'm in a Java program and I've issued something and I'm waiting on a disk I/O, I could issue another thread and do something else while I'm waiting, and I can continue to generate these threads. Well, this at a certain point becomes sort of very messy and very complex to manage. The reactive manifesto is this idea of more of an actor model and microservice. Rather than start threads, I just start additional copies of these things. If it sounds like the server class model, it's very similar to that. So rather than doing a lot of thread management, I just allow these actors or these microservices to spin up and spin down, depending on what kind of load I need. So it's quite nice. This is sort of the high-level view here. If I have a lot of transactions, let's say, coming in here, I have this event loop, which really spits it out to these different actors or handlers here without having to generate threads. So like I said, if this looks like the old pathway requester, pathmon server class model, it's extremely similar to it. So that's why Keith is very excited about this reactive model and what can be done on NonStop, because it already fits our inherent architecture. So it's quite exciting. These are some of the topics we'll talk a little bit about more tomorrow. But Vertex is a big player in there. Akka is a big player. If you've talked to Keith, Keith has fairly brought Akka up. He's a big Akka fan. And Spring Boot is not necessarily reactive, but it's a model where it really pre-builds the environment for you. It makes a lot of pre-guesses for you, so you can get a Spring framework up very quickly in the environment. And all of these run on NonStop. And if you want to play around with them, I put links in here. You'll get a copy of the presentation. You know, there's a startup thing on VertX. There's one on Akka. There's one on Spring Boot. There's plenty of free training out there. So if you want to explore any one of these things, I would suggest that. So Agile, I've already mentioned a little bit. So the Agile software development is sort of this model here. Individuals' interactions over processes and tools. Working software over comprehensive documentation. Customer collaboration over contract negotiation. Responding to change versus following a plan. So the whole Agile model is to get things up quickly. Not necessarily you're going to develop a whole application, but you're going to be developing parts of it and moving along and whatnot. This also fits this reactive model really well, right? So we can get something up quick. We can play around with it. We can see if it's working for the business unit. If it's not, what do they not like about it? And let's tweak it, let's tweak it, let's tweak it. But it gets into this continuous integration, continuous delivery model, where we're continually developing new things and delivering them on a pretty fast basis. So you can see this model here that we design, we build it, we configure it, we test it, we release it, and we go right back into the design. This loop never stops. We're in this continuous environment. This gets into another area that's had a lot of press, which is DevOps. The idea of development and operations working together rather than development creating something, throwing it over the fence, and then operations going, well, this is no good, we need to do this, that, instead of going this back and forth. The idea is to build these teams, and this is also very agile development methodology where you've got development, you've got operations, you've got the business unit, you've got the stakeholder. Everybody is in the mix up front to develop this thing. Everybody has a say. So in an agile sprint, for example, let's say I've got a 2-week sprint where I'm going to deliver this thing in 2 weeks. Generally, there's a meeting every day of all the players to say what's happened, where are we going, what's any issues, this, that, and the other thing. So everybody has the say at the same time up front, develop this thing. And the idea is you're only committing to 2 weeks, right? So okay, I'm going to attend these meetings every day for the next 2 weeks. We'll get this thing out and running. So that's the whole idea of getting in there. Some of the big people that have implemented this have used specific tools. Jenkins is a big player there. Git for the open source management, Ansible, and some of the other artifact repositories there. Git runs on NonStop. Jenkins can run on NonStop. Ansible can interface to NonStop. And we have a number of solutions there. We're going to talk more about this tomorrow, but it's the main point here that I want to stress is that NonStop can certainly play in this environment. So if you're moving into this agile sprint environment, don't rule NonStop out as a potential platform for whatever is being developed by these sprints and everything else. We're certainly capable of getting in there, and this is a rendering of Jenkins, either the Jenkins master on NonStop or the Jenkins master off NonStop with a Jenkins agent on there. You can run it either way. And you can still use the Eclipse environment to interface into the Git and Git on NonStop. So a lot of options in the way that this is set up. So all the middleware offerings that we're currently getting in there, we supported Tomcat for a while, JBoss for a while. We got the J Toolkit to get into the Pathway environment. The MQ series has come out. We had the Spring framework, Hibernate, the VertX, Akka, Spring Boot. We'll talk about those rules for a rules engine. If you want to play with that, we've got that running on there. We have played around with a lot of open source stuff. If you play around with Hadoop, you've probably heard of Zookeeper, Kafka, stream sets, a lot of these things. People in my group have put those things on and got them running on NonStop. So NonStop can have a lot of open source and new tools that can run on it. So don't necessarily rule it out. We look at NoSQL. We've brought the Redis database up. That was how we did our IoT demo a couple 2 years ago. We had a Redis database, which is a NoSQL database, up and running on there, and that's actually now being developed specifically on NonStop. So if you hear about IMC, the in-memory cache, that is actually Redis. That's been sort of deported to NonStop. We're doing some good things with it. One of the Redis was probably the fastest NoSQL database out there and the most unreliable. So what we did was build some reliability into Redis. So we've created a process pair with the Redis NoSQL database in cache. So some good reliability that we've added to Redis to make it a little more bulletproof, but still not affecting its speed and everything else. So it allows us to play in that area. You'll see a lot more coming out with that within memory. And let's see, SOAP Axis. I think we've got some JSON talk and REST talk later today in our environment. So there's a lot of capabilities that have come onto NonStop, especially, I would say, now that we're on the x86 platform. We're able to do a whole lot of stuff and port a whole lot of stuff onto the system. So it's really the capabilities are exploding on NonStop as to what we're able to set up and do and how we fit into other environments. So a lot of things that we wouldn't have necessarily claimed before, but very open. We're supporting virtualized. We're supporting really all standard hardware now. There really is no hardware in NonStop anymore. We're just taking everything that HPE already developed. If you run it on an HPE platform, if you want to take the virtualized NonStop and run it on a different platform, Dell servers or Cisco servers, something like that, that's open. You can do that if you want. Our only requirement right now is the Mellanox Rocky switch. We need a high-speed switch between us, but we don't sell that, so not our stuff. Database compatibility, you see that we're really moving in that in a big way. Really want to make an Oracle database. That's a huge environment. There's a lot of unhappy Oracle customers out there that we have a great desire to make them happy. So get them on NonStop. Very standard middleware, very standard software that's out there, modern compilers. We're supporting, I'm going to talk tomorrow about the Python release. So we're just running Python. We've run Python for years. So Python, you know about the Node.js that we ported the JavaScript stuff that was on there. So we're supporting a lot of different languages and compilers and emerging technologies. So tracking IoT, tracking distributed ledger technology, moving into a lot of different areas. I'm working with the high-performance computing group within HPE to see how we tie NonStop in with some of the Apollo big number crunchers. So is there a play for NonStop, sort of a sidecar with deep learning system or machine learning system? We're playing around with a fraud idea now where we're doing a lot of machine learning on the Apollo system, HPE, and then being able to push that in real time over to the NonStop system to see if we can detect fraud in real time based on the machine learning that it's doing. It may develop new patterns for detecting fraud and then immediately push them over. And of course, we're still very highly reliable, very highly scalable, and the best availability out the door. And we can't do this without our partners. So a tribute to all the partners that are here today. We certainly want to thank them beyond supplying breakfast and lunch and all that stuff. They do a lot of work for us now. You can see that we're we're pushing some of the stuff that we used to do now is really all partner-based products that are coming out. So we feel we have a very, very good working relationship and that they're certainly allowing us to do development and get into new areas that we really can't do on our own anymore. So it's a very good existence between the partners and NonStop. That's it. I think I've almost got us back on time. How about that? I think we're going to break, right?
Yeah, so thanks very much, Justin.
Great to, well, yeah, any questions, please let me know.
One of the slides, you mentioned that that would be part of So in one of the slides, you mentioned that TLS 1.2.
Right.
That part of,
yes.
So are we talking NonStop X or NonStop I?
That's both, I believe. That's I and X, because SSL is becoming less and less secure. So the TLS 1.1 came out, but TLS is going right now. It looks like that's the default standard.
Because on that slide, it was mentioned JSPLEASE.22.
Yeah.
So I assume that it is only on NonStop I.
Yeah, I didn't duplicate the capability between J and L. So it's definitely on L.
Okay.
Yeah.
And one more question. So like, as we saw in this presentation, NonStop X and virtualization, that is the way to go now. But when HPE is going to solve the same for NonStop I?
I don't see that happening anytime real soon. I would be surprised if we stop selling it in the next few years. I would say it's probably before we can stop I. And then even, like I say, even when we announce that, we still got 5 years before we stop the quarter.
Yeah.
So I would say 7 years at least. Yeah. Maybe
anything like that.
That'll become all right, thank you. Oh, yeah. Anybody still registered for education?